Are you looking for a podcast that is beholden to no one except you? You have found patriots willing to take on the establishment. Welcome to Cracker Culture, with your hosts Smokin Joe and Ford O'Connell. We're taking names and kicking ass. Join us as we confront the issues of politics and expose the corruption. Many of our politicians are opportunists. We intend to keep you informed. It's time to hold them accountable. Join us. We are not trying to be anyone's voice, just trying to help you be your own. We love you, Florida. You can find us at Smokin Joe YouTube, Cracker Culture YouTube, and most streaming platforms. Love, peace, and gator grease.
Welcome to this edition of the Cracker Culture, the podcast for real Floridians. Today's show was sponsored by Farmer Joe's Fresh Market, located at 1401 Southwest Pine Island Road in beautiful Cape Coral, Florida, 33991. Hands down, the greatest grocery store in all of Lee County. They are temporarily closed doing repairs from the hurricane, but they'll be reopened soon. So go out and check out Farmer Joe's. First thing I'd like to ask you to do is please like, share, and subscribe. The most important thing you can do for our show is share, share, share. I hope everyone's having a blessed day, and thank you for joining us. Ford O'Connell's with us, and I want to thank him for spending some time with us today. Ford is a businessman like myself, but he's also a lawyer, a political strategist, a commentator on Fox News, Fox Business. He's an author, and he's appeared on a variety of publications, far more than we have time to discuss. I'm not. I'm an average guy from Southwest Florida. Like many others, I work every day, and other than a little bitching about my taxes, politics wasn't a daily point of conversation. I knew local political figures and some of the underhanded dealings, but like others, I ignored it and minded my own business until I realized it was my own business. I was tired of being undervalued because of my economic or social standing. But from the first time I met Ford, we talked just like any of my other friends. We were a cold beer and an airboat ride away from a wild story for our grandkids to tell. With Ford's extensive knowledge and my nature for just saying stuff like it is, I believe we can help the average citizen to have a better understanding that their voice matters as much as anyone else has done. I'm Smokin Joe, and this is Cracker Culture. Ford, thank you for joining me today, brother.
Always good to be with you, my friend.
Yeah, like I said, I appreciate Ford working with me. We've done this show once. We're doing it again. Again, the first thing I want to talk to Ford about is some of the debates here. We're going to start, since this is a Florida show, we're going to start with Florida. And the first thing I'm going to ask you about, does Charlie Crist have a rider, and what the hell's up with that fan? Does he got to have special privileges? And before anybody, you comment, I'm going to show people what I'm talking about.
You may notice at home and here in the theater a small fan next to one of the podiums. That is there by special request for Congressman Crist. We do ask that everyone here in the theater remain quiet during the debate. We will.
Well, what's that fan for? I mean, is it to keep the stench away? I mean, what is Charlie Crist got a fan for?
Well, look, while Charlie Crist is the biggest chameleon and shapeshifter in Florida political history, that fan is always about making Charlie look good on camera. He started doing this, I believe, back when he was debating Rick Scott because of the temperature in the auditorium, but it's always Charlie. It's always Charlie being about Charlie, and the whole fan is to make sure that those who don't pay attention all that often see him in the best light for the little time that they do tune in.
Well, I'm going to play one more clip from that night, and to me was the takeaway from the whole show. I'll take your opinion when I get.
Ron, you talk about Joe Biden a lot. I understand. You think you're going to be running against him. I can see how you might get confused, but you're running for governor. You're running for governor, and I have a question for you. You're running for governor. Why don't you look in the eyes of the people of the state of Florida and say to them, if you're reelected, you will serve a full 4-year term as governor? Yes or no? Yes or no, Ron? Will you serve a full 4-year term if you're reelected governor of Florida? It's not a tough question. It's a fair question. He won't tell you.
We did not agree on the candidates asking each other questions. Governor, it's your turn.
Well, listen, I know that Charlie's interested in talking about 2024 and Joe Biden, but I just want to make things very, very clear. The only worn-out old donkey I'm looking to put out to pasture is Charlie Crist.
What that right there was the takeaway from the whole debate. And Charlie Crist, he is a worn out old donkey. But here's the thing: a lot of people said that Ron was nervous. I didn't get that. I felt like Ron was just agitated having to deal with the stupidity that is Charlie Crist.
Well, look, Charlie Crist is a seasoned politician, and you got to understand that he knows he's way down in the polls, and he's trying everything possible to make Ron DeSantis, not only Florida's governor, but America's governor, nervous. And it didn't work because all Ron DeSantis had to do was constantly tie Charlie Crist to Joe Biden, who's about as unpopular in Florida as Bufo toads. And he did that. That's all he had to do. And the latest poll has America's governor, Ron DeSantis, up by 14 points with less than 13 days to go. So guess what? Ron DeSantis is going to win re-election. But I'll tell you, Charlie Crist, what amazes me about him is with people hurting with the cost of everything rising, with inflation at a 40-year high, what's he want to hang his hat on? Third-term abortions and transgendered surgeries for minors. This shows you exactly how tone deaf the Democrats are leading into the 2022 midterms.
Yeah, I mean, I would hate to see Charlie Crist. I mean, he's already a senator. I'd hate to see him back in the governor's seat in Florida, not my state. Well, another thing about that debate is Charlie Crist kept trying to push DeSantis for that 4 year. You won't even tell us that you're going to run 4 years. Now, here's where I look at that differently. If I was Ron DeSantis, you're going to say, look, I said, you're bitching at me because I might have a better opportunity to help more people than I'm helping in Florida. I've got the best lieutenant governor lined up to take my spot. What is the complaint? I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, but that's the way I feel.
Well, look, Charlie Crist is trying to say that Ron DeSantis is not focused on Floridians. Remember, we talk about this often. Most people don't pay attention to politics. They tune in with 3 weeks to go. And I totally agree with you. I think the maturation of Ron DeSantis is one of the most impressive things I've seen. When he began 4 years ago, he was running a shoestring, chaotic campaign, and he barely beat a guy who he OD'd at a hotel room in Miami. And now, 4 years later, we are seeing somebody who's grown into the role, who has all the tools to potentially be president of the United States. It is one of the most amazing turnarounds in politics, and it's a testament to Ron DeSantis and him working at being governor, but also properly serving the people of Florida.
Well, I mean, like I said, as a Floridian, I went through a lot of governors in my lifetime, but I mean, hands down, I have to say, Ron DeSantis has done more for this state than any other governor in my lifetime.
He's done more for this state in a 4 year period than any governor has done. Now, think about that. And remember what Ron has done. It's not just pushing back on the lockdowns, not just keeping people employed. It's pushing back on the Mouse House Disney World and punching them in there when it came to woke corporatism. It was also making sure, being concerned about what's being taught in schools. Ron DeSantis had a different approach to making sure Florida was the envy of the nation. And since he's been governor, I believe 300,000 people have flooded into our state. And that's a testament to his leadership.
Absolutely. Like I said, I mean, I understand. If I was Ron DeSantis, I would run for governor. But if you offered me the position of the highest office in the land, and I felt like I could do a job that would take care of the people, I'd have to take the higher end.
Well, Joe, to your point, here's the great thing for Floridians. The 2024 Republican presidential nominee is going to be a Floridian. The only question is whether it's Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis. So we're in good hands either way. I personally think he's doing such a good job in Florida. I feel a little selfish, and I don't want him to go anywhere else because I know that he barely beat Andrew Gillum by 34,000 votes, and I don't want to look a couple years down the road and see another Andrew Gillum trick the Florida voters into thinking that maybe he can do the job.
Well, I appreciate everything you said there. And like I said, I agree with you on everything. I just do not want to go through another 4 years of Biden by any choice. If I got to give up Ron and take the lieutenant governor I'll take that choice.
No, I hear you. We all know that Joe Biden's got to go. he's the leading cause of all the problems that are hitting you in the pocketbook. Remember, this is about my money, my finances, my ability to pay my rent, to pay gas, and my family. What's being taught in schools, how safe they are, how secure the border is, etc. These issues are not going away. Ron DeSantis does a good job putting Florida first. Maybe he will be the guy who puts America first. We could only be so lucky.
Well, I'm going to skip out of Florida just for a second. I want to talk to you about the Dr. Mehmet Oz and John Fetterman debate. It was such a brutal debate. I felt bad for Fetterman. He recently had a stroke. I think that when you have if you have a medical problem, especially it's neurological, I think it's time to a few months to rest and recuperation. I don't think it's time to jump in like John Fetterman's doing. But if you watch this debate, and I got a little clip for you, it's going to take a few minutes. Check this out, and then we'll discuss this afterwards.
Ask the U.S. government, they'll tell you they have 4% waste and fraud. Now, we've got 4% waste and fraud. We ought to be able to take care of that. John Fetterman's, however, response continually is to raise taxes. He raised taxes as mayor. He tried to raise taxes as a lieutenant governor, 46%. That's a big tax rate. He supported Joe Biden's recent tax rate increase, and he's done that without paying his own taxes 67 times. I'll say that again. He hasn't paid his own taxes 67 times, but he's raising mine and yours. Those are radical positions. They're extreme. They're out of touch with the values of Pennsylvanians. And I can make the difficult decisions, as you do in the operating room as a surgeon. I'll make them cutting our budget as well to make sure we don't have to raise taxes on a population already desperately in pain from the high inflation rate.
Mr. Fetterman, I will allow a 15-second rebuttal. He has specifically said you have not paid your taxes and that you want to raise taxes on Americans. How do you respond?
Absolutely. The Oz rule, of course, he's lying, and it got her paid, and it has never been an issue in any of the campaign before. It was all Dr. Oz can't possibly understand what that is like. You know, he has 10 gigantic mansions. You know, we must push back against corporate greed.
I've been trying to talk about policy issues with the people of Pennsylvania. As a doctor, I listen to their ideas and I want to talk about them. When John Fetterman brings up houses, the irony is he didn't pay for his own house. He got it for $1 from his sister. And he hasn't been able to earn a living on his own. He's lived off his parents. So
that's like he got his Pennsylvania house from his own inlays from $1.
Mr. Fetterman, we have to continue on.
Speaking about that topic, there's one person on this stage who's broken the law, we believe. John Fetterman took a shotgun, chased an unarmed African-American man, and put the gun, apparently, according to that man, to his chest. John, you weren't pulled over by the police. They let you go. You were the mayor at the time. Why haven't you apologized to that unarmed, innocent black man who you put a shotgun to his chest?
All right. We will allow a 30-second response to that, Mr. Fetterman, specifically what he was saying referring to the incident in Braddock.
No, I made the opportunity to defend our community as the chief law enforcement officer there. Everybody in Braddock, an overwhelmingly majority community of black community, all understood what happened. You know, they understood what happened, and everybody agreed that, and nobody believes that it was anything about me making a split-second decision to defend our community as well.
Why not apologize?
Mr. Oz, please.
Oh my gosh. I mean, and that was the best of that debate. The very best that Fetterman done the whole debate was right there.
Look, it was hard to watch. He was bumbling. He was stumbling. Heck, he made Joe Biden looks like Socrates compared to Fetterman. No one wants to see anyone have a stroke, okay?
No.
But this Senate race is the most important Senate race in the country because it's essentially going to determine who has control of the U.S. Senate. In other words, it's the Orange Bowl of Senate races, and the Democratic candidate had a stroke, and he's incapable of serving the people of Pennsylvania, and he needs to withdraw. But unfortunately, the corporate media has been running cover for him for 5 months, and it's the people who miss out and don't understand exactly how much trouble this guy's in.
Well, I mean, maybe it's just the way I grew up, but I watched that debate, and the reason I put a little bit of it in that little clip is they started out arguing over, he brought up how many houses Mehmet had, and then Mehmet brought up that he got his house for $1. I mean, back and forth, can't make a living without his parents. I mean, it was brutal. But as a common person, that don't even compute. Oh, I'm gonna be pissed at everybody in the world, but I got 15 houses. I only got my house for $1. We got house payments. Some of us just lost our houses. I mean, what are they thinking? They think that the average citizen wants to hear that?
Look, you're absolutely right. The average citizen barely has one house, let alone multiple houses. And they certainly aren't having their inlays give it to them for $1. I mean, that does not touch what people are concerned about. People want to make their payments. People want to make sure their kids go to school. They want to pay for gas. They want to be able to eat. And these two gentlemen were not addressing that. But I think what's really bad here is that you have a corporate media who's paid to cover John Fetterman. He had this stroke back in May. Okay.
Right.
And they're pretending like the Republicans are making a big deal about him debating. And frankly, the guy can't string two sentences together and he's lost. And further, I mean, we talk about how bad Biden is. Fetterman's a 6'8" Bernie Sanders in a hoodie. Okay. So people need to know, because we talk about this. The average person doesn't pay the kind of attention we do to politics, and they need to know, because not only do they have the same vote as you and I have, but they are also affected the same way and sometimes even worse.
Yeah, like I said, it was amazing. And one of the things in that debate that no conservative, white conservative in the country could do is take a shotgun and point it at an unarmed African American's chest. And from what I understand, it was an innocent unarmed African American, and then get away with it and tell me he said, and if you noticed, Mamet said the African American community, but when you turned over to Fetterman, he knew he didn't know what word to use, but he used black in such a like sucked in way. He sucked in when he said it. If that had been Mamet, even he's Turkish, but he's light enough. If he'd went out with a shotgun on an African American, that we would have never heard the end of it.
Of course, there's a double standard going on here, and the media doesn't talk about what John Fetterman did when he shot down that individual. And unfortunately, they turn a blind eye. The media circles the wagons for the Democrats. The Democrats will not flush out their own.
He didn't shot. They don't think he shot him. He just pointed the gun at his chest.
He didn't shoot him.
Yeah,
but if you'd had that type of armed confrontation, again, the same thing still holds, that it would be the top line story everywhere, and the Republican would be chased from the race, and probably rightfully so if we know more details about the encounter.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is, I mean, even before the stroke, Fetterman seems a little unhinged. So, I mean, if that's the case, even if Dr. Oz isn't a strong conservative, as strong a conservative as maybe some conservatives would like, he still leaps and bounds above Fetterman.
Oh, there's no question. Look, you're talking about someone, I hate to say this, you got a weekend at Bernie's candidate here. I mean, you know that 1980s movie where they drag around the dead guy? I mean, the Pennsylvania Democratic Party, okay, there's something going on here. The Pennsylvania Democratic Party was trying to put him in witness protection program. The lead evaporated, and then they realized that this guy got a debate. Unfortunately, early voting started in mid-September in Pennsylvania, and they're trying to bleed out the clock, have the Democratic governor elected in Pennsylvania, and then have that person appoint Fetterman's replacement. This is an entire cover-up, not just by the media, but also the political operatives in Pennsylvania. And again, the average man and woman loses. Why? Because you've got someone who shouldn't be serving Pennsylvanians, who should be withdrawing from the race, but they won't do that because that's the nature of partisan politics.
Well, I mean, a lot like Charlie Crist, Fetterman has flip-flopped on a lot of issues, fracking for one. I mean, he absolutely anti-fracking. And last night he said he was for fracking. What's the real Fetterman?
Yeah, to your point, look, fracking is a big thing in Pennsylvania. Those are high-paying jobs, and that's talking about unleashing American energy. And back in 2016, Fetterman signed a petition that said he wanted to ban fracking forever. Okay, and now he's saying it. Why is he saying it? He's saying it because he loses. And if he were elected, is he going to go soft on fracking? No, he's going to go back in there because he's lying to say what he needs to say at the moment because his lead has been dwindled down. He said the same thing about socialized medicine. He's had the same stance as Bernie Sanders, which ultimately means, as good as it sounds, no one's going to get any access to care. And if he's elected to the United States Senate, then Joe Biden's got another ally to basically screw you when it comes to medicine.
Yeah, I heard him. Mehmet kind of pointed out his affinity. Mehmet pointed out that Fetterman was with Bernie, his affinity for Bernie, and then Fetterman turned around and said, "Why don't you go to Vermont and run against Bernie instead of me?" I bet he wished he would.
But that's a good thing in Pennsylvania. Again, most people know the sort of big names, your Bidens and your Bernies. And when you're tying someone to Bernie Sanders, particularly in Western Pennsylvania, that's not a good thing. And the fact of the matter is, the reason why Oz brought up that confrontation is Oz is doing quite well with African Americans in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is what usually decides Pennsylvania elections. And if he can pull 15%, he very well may win. And it's just unfortunate that who loses out in this whole deal? The voters of Pennsylvania.
Oh, I totally agree. And again, I think about that. If you had a Fetterman Biden run country, how far do you think we're going to make it?
Not very far, because essentially the Chinese Communist Party are going to own the country about 4 minutes later.
Yeah, I agree. I want to move away from that because I want to talk about this lady that's running for governor in Arizona, Kari Lake. She is a firecracker and a half. I mean, I wish she was running for an office down here in Florida. I don't give her a governor, but I'll give her some. I'm going to show you a little leaked footage here.
I'm sorry that you asked the same question 3 times and wasted your time with the same question.
I'm sorry you couldn't bring yourself to actually see the world in a different light.
Well, are you a journalist or unbiased journalist or not? Why are you trying to tell me how I should see the world? You're a journalist.
No, you don't get any. You don't get any more questions to me. You've cut me off. You don't get any questions to me.
Well, you're a journalist, sir. You should be unbiased. You shouldn't be telling me how to see the world.
Man, I'm telling you, from calling out all the reporters here in the countries, now she's calling them out overseas. I mean, she is something else, man.
Well, for those who don't know who Kari Lake is, the Republican nominee for governor in Arizona, pay attention, because this woman, to your point, is going places. She's teaching Republicans and giving them a master class in how to disarm the media, because Republicans need to understand you have to go through the media to get your message out, but the media is not your friend. And the reason why she's able to do that is because for 20 years, she was a TV anchor, I believe, in the Phoenix area. She's someone who can really teach the Republicans a lot about communicating through the press.
Yeah, like I said, she's on fire. And of course, like you said, she had been a journalist for years, a real journalist for years. So I mean, she's eating them up and spitting them out. It's just amazing. I want to skip on down back to Fort Myers. We'll talk about first. I'd like to talk about the mayoral race of Cape Coral. Now, in that race, you've got Thomas Shadrick, or they call him T-Shad, but Thomas Shadrick, and versus the incumbent John Gunner. I've been pro Shadrick all along, and I'll be quite honest with you why. I've watched Gunner participate in LGBTQ plus whatever events and stuff like that, and put on parades using taxpayer money. And it kind of shunned me from Gunner right there. What are your opinions on the Cape Coral mayoral race, and where do you stand between Gunter and Shadrick?
Well, I think when it comes to Tom, he's got all the tools to succeed as mayor of Cape Coral. His experience, particularly when it comes to budgets and projects, is going to be important, particularly as Cape Coral rebuilds. And I haven't seen a heck of a lot out of Gunter. He's a placeholder. He's a replacement, and he's someone who just seems to be biding his time so he can win. And unfortunately, the establishment is behind Gunter, and that's not a good thing, because we need at this critical time to find the person who's best to be the steward of Cape Coral going forward. And personally, I think that's Tom.
I gotta agree. I mean, Tom is my man, and has been since the beginning. Let's talk about the two most important school board races right now: the one in Lee County and one in Collier County. Uh, in Lee County is District 6 at large, and that seat, the Republican candidates for that seat is Denise Nystrom, and the opponent is Jada Langford Fleming. Now, it's no secret I've been pro Denise Nystrom since the day I met her. I looked into her, and she was just a wonderful person with all the credentials. I grew up around this area. I live in LaBelle. Jada Langford Fleming is from LaBelle. I made it on one of my other shows, and I'm not bashing Jada, but this is realistically, I put this out. I go to a local barber who went to school with Jada and her sister and all of them. And so the politics come up, and I said, well, how do you feel about Jada running for school board? And he looked at me because he's in Henry County. Jada's running for school board in Lee County. And he said, I wouldn't let Jada Langford and Fleming, but he said I wouldn't let Jada Langford, I wouldn't trust her to make me a TV dinner. Now that's from locals here that went to school with her.
Look, when I go around to the different Republican gatherings in Lee County, when I go to the clubs, when I go to the RECs, what I hear conservatives say over and over is, I care about substance and I care about facts. Now let's look at the facts as they relate to Denise Nystrom. Here is somebody who's been a teacher. Here's somebody who's been an assistant superintendent. Basically, somebody who already has the skills and knowledge of how to do the job that's actually running for the job. And frankly, she's the better candidate based on that. Now, I'm going to be honest. I have a bias. I'm friends with Denise Nystrom. But when I look at Jada Langford Fleming, and I have nothing against Jada, it seems her only two qualifications are the fact that Terry Miller's her campaign manager, and essentially she's the trainer for Brendan Leslie. Now, think about that for a second. This is what we're talking about. And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about corruption. People say, I will vote for the best person for the job. This is the best person for the job. And yet somehow she's being slimed 9 ways to Sunday. And what's disingenuous when she's being slimed by Brendan Leslie is that he doesn't explain that he's getting paid by Terry Miller. I think that's just wrong. And we look at our schools in Lee County, they are so dysfunctional. We're worried about busing. We're worried about what's taught in schools. We're worried about safety. We're worried about a $2 billion budget and how we can best serve the kids. And what are we doing? We're playing establishment politics and not focusing on the kids, because I'm going to tell you, the primary road out of poverty runs by the schoolhouse. And if we don't take care of the future of Lee County, Lee's children, then Lee County is not going to be worth dirt.
Oh, I totally agree. Like I said, I'm a product of the Lee County school system as well as my wife and our children. And we realize there's been problems for years, but it's far greater now. And again, I chose Denise off of her qualifications. And as far as Jada comes from a good family. I have nothing bad to say about the Langford family. It's a good family. I just don't feel like that Jada is qualified or can bring up to the level that Denise Nystrom can bring our school board.
Look, I think you make a great point. Jada may be a good candidate for another office. We are talking about school board, and we're talking about someone who had some serious experience in that, in Denise Nystrom. And what are we doing? We're trying to substitute the bad corruption that's currently there with a new kind of corruption, then saying things will get better. That really, really worries me, because, again, we need to be focused on our schools. We need to get the best people in there, regardless of who we like more.
Oh, I totally agree. Well, let's move a little south. And in Collier County, the school board race that's the most talked about, what's going on in Collier County, is the race between Kelly Lichter and Jen Mitchell. Personally, I have supported Kelly. I like Kelly and her husband, Nick. They're great people. I can't align with what Jen Mitchell's done to the students in Collier County. She was pro the masking, pro everything that most of us conservatives was against. Jen was okay with. What are your feelings on that race, and where do you stand on the Mitchell-Lichter race?
Look, I want to again not do the Brendan Leslie. I'm going to put my cards out on the table and be as transparent as possible. I've donated to Kelly Lichter. She's a friend. I know both of them. I don't have anything against Jen Mitchell, but I will say this to your point. We had a pandemic. Jen Mitchell favored masking. We found out that masking hurt the educational growth of children. It was a terrible idea, not just as a conservative. Science didn't even dictate that we should be doing that. Further, I've been in CCREC meetings. I'm a little concerned that Jen Mitchell doesn't know the difference between CRT and you name it. And I think that that's a very big concern because as Floridians, we're concerned about what's being taught in schools. Okay. Now, when I turn to Kelly Lichter, here's somebody who, again, like Denise Nystrom, has experience in running a school, who understands many of the nuances that essentially Jen Mitchell doesn't. I believe that Jen Mitchell had her time and she didn't do as good a job as she could have done. Now, and she's now asking to be sent back. And once again, you have a stronger candidate out there who probably should beat Jen Mitchell.
Oh, I totally agree. And again, I never heard a bad word about Kelly Lichter around this area, nothing at all, until she had I guess, a conflict with the Donalds family. And that has really that has caused a lot of issues between conservatives in the area who like all parties. But, it really has got dirty in Collier County.
And that's unfortunate. And the issues in Collier County schools are slightly different than the issues in Lee County schools. And unfortunately, people are being distracted versus focusing on the kids. And they need to honestly walk into that voting booth and ask themselves one question: who's going to do a better job for Collier County kids? The candidate who essentially voted for masking students and doesn't seem to really understand CRT, or someone who's run a school. I think it's time for a change. Stop focusing on the politics. Start focusing on the future and the kids.
Oh, I couldn't agree more with that. And again, like I said, I hope that they work it out because this infighting in these RECs is going to be the ruin of them.
Let me tell you, it is terrible in Collier County. It's abysmal in Lee County, and it ain't a heck of a lot better in Charlotte County. We got to understand, we are the envy of the nation, and Southwest Florida is the machine and the cog in the engine that keeps Florida red, and we have to understand that all eyes in the nation are on us, okay? We talk about local politics. They're all on us, and we have a chance to really right the ship in Florida, particularly with Ron and Tallahassee. This is our day, and I feel we're pissing it away due to establishment politics and petty disputes and not focusing on the people.
Oh, that's spot on. I'll move on back up to Lee County, and mainly I wanted your position on elected school board superintendent. I'm totally against it because then you can't recall him. You're stuck with him for 4 years. What is your opinion on that? And also Dr. Christopher Bernier, who I was not real sure about in the beginning because I felt like that we didn't get the pool to select from that we were promised. But that being said, from what I can tell, some of his actions, along with having to deal with the actions of the hurricane that just come through, the largest one we've ever had, he has done a pretty good job so far. What's your opinions on elected and Bernier?
Well, let's start with the superintendent. I, like you, think it should be an unelected position that's accountable to the board, because if you get a bad apple in there, you need to recall them or revoke them immediately. And that's the whole point of the school board, is to be accountable to the voters. So I think that's a good thing. I think if you make it elected, well, that sounds enticing, and you think that you've got another layer to protect you against cronyism. Unfortunately, you're going to have cronyism, okay, because you're going to have Terry Miller picking who the next superintendent is, and that's going to do a real disservice to Lee County and the Lee County's children. It's not about politics. It's about the kids. And right now, given what's going on in the environment in Lee County, you need to have that person basically, responsible by the school board versus the voters, because you could have a superintendent who could neuter an entire school board, and that's not the point. And that's why we have them from each of the districts, and we have an at-large member as well. And as it comes for Chris, look, I haven't been to enough school board meetings and see it. He's got a real opportunity here to move forward when it comes to Hurricane Ian and cleaning up in the aftermath. And if he does a good job and the superintendent remains unelected, maybe he'll remain in the job. This is his time to shine. And if he wants to stay in that job, he can do it.
No, I agree with that. And that's exactly my sentiments on it, because I want to be able to not just go up there and run my mouth. I want to be able to get you terminated if need be. Now, that's not my job to headhunt, but I do got to look at what's best for my children, and my children are a part of that system. So,
I think that's absolutely right. We're worried about the children, and children have a limited time in school, and we got to make sure that we are serving them the best way possible with a quality education and a safe education. And look, on paper, it sounds like it should be an elected position, but given the environment we're in Lee County right now, I think it has to remain unelected.
I'm glad we see alike.
Of course.
Ford, what you got coming up? You got anything coming up?
I got my head down for the next 12, 13 days. I just want to make sure the red wave's going to come through. What I am going to tell you is the Republicans have already won the House. The only question is how close to 240 House seats we're going to have in the United States Congress. I'm pretty confident that Governor DeSantis is going to run the table, particularly if everyone in Lee, Collier, and Charlotte County turns out to vote. I know people are putting their lives back together, but if you do your civic duty, we're going to continue to be a nice, strong red wave state and the envy of the nation. Because I'm going to tell you something. When I leave Florida, you cannot believe how much people ask me about everything, about DeSantis. That's why I joke that he's America's governor in conservative circles, because he gave people a backbone, particularly during COVID, and fighting back with Fauci, and what he's doing with driving the wokeness out of schools. I mean, they can't get enough.
Right. Well, Ford, I appreciate you joining us today, and I know you got to try to stay warm while you're up there in Washington and get back here and get some sun in Florida. Folks, we appreciate you folks watching. This is the Cracker Culture, the podcast for real Floridians. We plan on putting this show out for you on Thursday nights, and hopefully I'll have Ford join me on a weekly basis. We will try to do a live show once a month when permitted. Other than that, folks, the best thing you can do for us is share this video. Share, and vote. I'm Smokin Joe for the podcast for real Floridians, the Cracker Culture. We see you soon. Love, peace, and gator grease. Thanks, Ford.
There was a time that being a Republican in this area of the country felt a little bit like being Gary Cooper in High Noon. Outnumbered in a big way. I remember the story of the fella here a while ago who was running for Congress as a Republican. He stopped by a farm to do some campaigning, and when the farmer heard he was a Republican, his jaw dropped, and he said, "Wait right here." He said, "While I get Ma. She's never seen a Republican before." So he got Ma, and the candidate looked around for a podium to give his speech from. The only thing he could find was a pile of that stuff that Bess Truman took 35 years trying to get Harry to call fertilizer. So he got up on the mound, and when they came back, he gave his speech. End of it, the farmer says, "That's the first time I've ever heard a Republican speech." Candidate said, "That's the first time I've ever given a Republican speech from a Democratic platform."